Hello everybody and welcome to the Bald Cafe podcast. This is the podcast where we share hair loss stories from guys all around the world in an attempt to help those who might also be struggling with hair loss, namely male pattern baldness. Now on today's episode, it's my absolute pleasure to introduce Tom, who is a musician and a software developer from the UK, which is of course where I am from. Hello Tom, it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast. How's it going?
Hey mate, yeah, thank you very much. It's an honour to be here. It's going very well.
Good, yeah, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story. Tom, let's just get straight into it, okay? Let's go way back, well, not too far back. You said it was a couple of years ago to when you first started noticing that your hair was thinning. Take me back to that time, and how did you first discover that you were losing your hair?
It's quite a funny one, really. I was on my stag do, and I was surrounded by none of my closest friends, and we'd rented this house out in the countryside, middle of nowhere, and we'd all just to spend a few days of chaos in intimacy.
Yeah.
And one of my friends, who'd actually gone bald himself, was very kind of quick and sharp to point out that my hair was thinning on the top, a little bit on the crown, and even though it was like really, really slight. Yeah, it was definitely like the beginning, I think. Or it might have been happening for a long time before that. I guess I don't know. But yeah, that was the moment when I realised, hey, now something's changing. I'm not immortal.
And that was the first time that someone had pointed it out to you, right? Okay, interesting. And so how did you feel at that first time when someone's pointed it out to you? How did you feel then, and what sort of, the days after, were you sort of checking yourself, or what kind of, how did it develop after that?
Well, I think for a while I didn't think about it, and I was in denial because it was so very slight. I just thought, it might even be temporary. But yeah, I was getting married as well, so I was super busy with a lot of other things. But once the dust had settled and I was just back in the flow of day-to-day life, I did notice in a photo I was on a punt in Cambridge. It's like a gondola thing. You've got this like stick thing to propel yourself, and my father-in-law had taken a photo of us in the punt from this bridge, and it went down on top of my head, and I was like, holy shit, like, there's definitely thinning hair on that crown. Like,
really?
Like, it was a very bright day as well, which didn't help, and my hair was quite long. And that was the point when I realised the longer I had my hair, the more visible it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that actually answered your question. Sorry, I went a bit off.
No, that's good. Yeah, no, I mean, just asking about how things went after that point. I mean, you might have seen my story. After I'd noticed, I obsessed over sort of checking it. You said, obviously, you were busy getting married, and you were, how old were you then? About 24, I think you said?
Yeah, 24, 25.
Yeah. And you said it was happening slowly, and so were you sort of regularly checking, or did you just kind of, whatever, not really think about it?
Once I could see it, like, more than once in videos, like of music videos and things like that, and projects that required video or photo of any kind. Once I could notice it, even if it was very slight, it made me very uncomfortable. And I was constantly checking to see, has it got worse?
I see.
And that's when I started delving into the abyss that is the internet and learning about all sorts of different things. And it was just a whole universe that I'd never even known existed.
Yeah. I suppose, you'd never really, thought to look into those things before, so it all comes as a bit of a shock. Let's talk about, before we get into that, I want to go back to that in a minute. You kind of, talk about what sort of things you looked into, but let's talk about family and sort of genetics. Did you ever think, I don't know, your family bald? Is there baldness in the family? Did you kind of see it coming, or what?
Yeah, so I'm half Ecuadorian, and on the Latin side of my family, the men tend to have these really luscious, horse-like manes of hair. So being that my dad is blonde, and he's bald as well, but he was always blonde, blue eyes, very Aryan looking in that sense, and my mum was kind of indigenous Indian looking from like Ecuador, and because I've always had dark features, like dark eyebrows and stuff, I just assumed that I had the hair genetic, and that I was safe from whatever my dad was bringing to me with the male pattern baldness.
Yeah,
totally wrong, like completely wrong.
Yeah, and I think, again, I don't want to keep taking it back to my own story, but we've got similar hairlines at the front, where I used to sort of, even though my dad was bald, I would look at my hairline and it was just solid. You know, there was nothing really going on there too much back then. It was just a solid hairline, and I never saw it. Just snuck up at me from behind, sort of thing, you know. And I never really, and I thought the same thing. I thought, oh, I've got away with this. You know, my dad's bald, but I've got no problems here. I've definitely got away with it. Unfortunately not. Unfortunately not. And so at that time, did you speak to your dad about it, or did you speak to your wife, or, you know, any other problems, like any other friends and family? Sorry.
Yeah, I did, and I made it sound like I played it really cool, but actually I didn't. Once I did start looking more and more at it and realising that, yes, it was actually male pattern baldness, and once I realised that wasn't even a thing, I obsessed over it. I was constantly checking, and I was like complaining to my wife about it, and she was so supportive the whole time. In all the way through, she just found it hilarious. She just found it really funny. Like she's like, you know, sort of slapped me on the head and stuff, and she says she loves it. You know, that's cool. But like, yeah, like it was nice not to have her like also like being concerned. So it was just me. Yeah. That made it like just realised it for me. So I did talk to her about it, but not that many people outside of it. No,
I suppose that's a form of support, really. You know, people being quite, you know, people around you being kind of blasé about it. I remember my girlfriend would say to me like, oh, you don't need to cut your hair off, just keep it like that. But that didn't really offer me much support, because I kind of feel like, oh, you don't really understand, you know, like it is worse. You might not look bad, but how I'm feeling because of it is bad, you know, so I need to kind of do this. I need to get rid of it. How about your dad? Did you speak to your dad about it? What's his sort of balding story? Did he go bald young as well?
Yeah, that's a great one. He was a huge source of support, and I mean, just even thinking about the fact that my dad, you know, growing up, I never once even imagined that there was anything that he was bald. That was just always the way he was. And he'd gone bald at like 16, 17, and his story with it is that he really struggled with it. He was in the Navy at the time, and he said he was just getting like mocked by all his mates, and he even went down the route of going as far as to look into like Harley Street of plugs back then. This is like the 70s or 80s or something, and he in the end, the thing that changed it all for him was an actual surgeon there, or whatever they're called, doctors or whatever, said to him, you know what, you're a handsome young man, you really don't need to do this. You're like, I actually really think, because he was going to go ahead with it, and the doctor said, you know what, if you really want it, come back in like 5-10 years, but I would honestly just go out there, shave your head, and you know, see what happens.
Get on with it.
It's the advice that he could have given my dad, and it's really amazing considering he could have taken a lot of money off it. So that was a turning point for my dad. Which in some ways reflected on me, like, you know, 30 years later.
Yeah, that's a reassuring, because I mean, if your dad had gone ahead with that sort of surgery, and he was still sort of, maybe, you know, I think with those hair transplants and things, later on you also need to get more done and things like that. I suppose that could have transpired onto you, and he might have given you the same advice, you know, oh, you can get it operated on or whatever. So I think that's worked out quite nicely in your favour. How about the sort of treatments that you looked into? You said you sort of hit the internet. What sort of things were you searching for, and did you come across?
Just, I'm sure everything that can be possibly be found, I found it. Wow, there was like, okay, the first stuff that I came across was like, you know, Rogaine, finasteride, all those like medications that you can get, and regular pills or whatever it is. And I immediately thought, nah, I don't want anything like that. Like, it just felt wrong to me. Maybe it's because I've just never been someone that's taken any kind of medication regularly. Maybe it's not just part of my culture. It seems to be a more commonly thing in the US that people treat everything like with some sort of pharmaceutical drug. But for me, it just seemed such a foreign concept. I have to like treat it like an illness. It's not an illness. That was something I was definitely sure of. This isn't something that's wrong. It's just something that I'd like to change, but I'm not willing to go to an extreme level to change my body with any kind of chemicals or anything. So that was that segment, and then there was the hair transplant kind of stuff I was looking at, and that was just even more. Videos of just those little dots of scabs in people's heads. It just looked horribly painful, and just not even that, like just the feeling to myself my inner self-worth would just feel bad if I looked in the mirror, and I knew that I just felt the need to go under the knife for something like hair. It made me realize that actually, out of all of those different options, just shaving my head was by far the most attractive. But it took me a long time, or I say a long time, it all happened very quickly. Maybe like 6 months of just like reading about it, and that's actually when I came across a YouTube video of yours with yourself and your father talking really candidly in the garden. It's a great video. For anyone listening who hasn't seen it, but that led me to that, and the rest is history. I decided that wasn't. I didn't want to look at it at all like any kind of I don't know, like a malady, you know. It just didn't resonate. So I decided to embrace it.
Yeah, I like what you said there, just about it, treating it as if it's an illness. And in fact, I've seen and read, and I mean, I've got a similar thought myself, but it's not, you know, I mean, people like to debate the genetics and things like that about male pattern baldness. On YouTube is unreal, you know. There's people who say, oh, you can just cure it with diet and things like that, it's not genetic, which I think is just a load of nonsense, of course. But you're totally right. I really like that point about it's not, you know, it doesn't affect me physically at all, you know, internally or anything. It's purely a mental struggle, really, for most people. And so what was the deciding factor when you realized, okay, I'm just gonna shave it off? What was the thing that made you what was the catalyst that made you take the action?
I'm not sure it was even like one immediate pivot or it was more like a gradual build up to it. So I just started cutting my hair shorter. I started going like 2, 1, 0.5 on the sides, and realizing I really liked having my head shaved, even when I kept it a bit long on top. And then over time, I just started taking it more off the top until I've basically got 0.5 or close to skinhead all over now with clippers. So it was kind of a gradual process, but it was still a very significant leap. It felt like that, and it looked like that to me, from like 1 or like 0.5 to like full, just as close as the clippers will get.
One thing I wanted to ask you actually just popped into my mind. Do you think, because obviously you've still got some hair left, right? You know, on here and whatnot. It's sort of going at the back and sort of on top here. Really, really similar to mine. Do you kind of see it as you're sort of beating it? You're like beating the inevitable. You're just nipping it in the bud. You know, just ripping off the plaster. You're just getting it done before it sort of slowly tears away at you.
Like 100%. Like that's a huge factor in all of this. Spent a few months thinking about it quite a lot, and I realized what the time. You know, this is just crazy. Like, and then I saw people in the street or on the bus or whatever who'd been clinging on clearly for like decades in some cases, people in my life, and I was just like, wow, like, is it worth spending all that time worrying about something that's so insignificant, ridiculously insignificant, really. And I know it doesn't feel like that at the time, and if you're going bald or going through those early stages, that's not going to feel helpful to hear, right? But when you do cross the other side, you realize how insignificant it is. It's mind-blowing.
Such a good point. No, they've nailed it. It's only once you kind of accept it, you shave it off, you move on, that's when you realize, you know, I don't know what I was so worried about, you know. You've probably seen the video I did where I recorded my initial reaction, and at that point I never ever would have thought I would be in a place now where I literally, you know, and this is 100% honesty, if someone said, oh, you can have a full head of hair back, no problem, I can give it to you, I wouldn't take it, because it doesn't affect me anymore, you know. I'm just not bothered about it. It's just hair, like you said. So yeah, that's a fantastic point. I like that a lot. And so did you looked into the treatments, but you never really went to any consultations or looked any further than that? You sort of shaved it off. Did you shave it off yourself, or did you go to the barbers, or how did that work?
I just did it myself. I was really excited. It always looked fun. I've always had a lot of hair. I mean, for maybe a lot of my teens, I had hair down to like my chest. So I've had that chapter of my life. I don't feel like I still want to like experiment with it. And so it was real easy just to get the clippers out. And I was, in fact, just really excited more than anything, just to see, the obvious, what, is my head going to look really lumpy or something? I think everyone has that fear, right?
Yeah.
And I kind of realised I had it now, because I'd always had hair out. It was just like, wow, I've never actually seen myself with ears. I look a bit like an orc, I guess. But, so I just did it myself with some clippers.
Did it yourself?
It was really
nice.
fun, and I really enjoy it.
And I see you played around. I don't know. Maybe I'll ask you to give me some pictures. I can put them into the video. But you've played around with different styles, and I saw you rocking the mohawk for a bit, kind of going with the slight receding hairline. But it works, right?
Oh, I lost you there for a second.
Yes, yeah.
But yeah, on the mohawk, that was the one hairstyle that I felt like unfulfilled with hair that I'd never had. I'd never tried in any way. So it was really fun to go to the side and just have like a little mini mohawk.
Yeah.
It was cool.
I enjoyed that. It was good. And listen, one of the other things we talked about, and I want to get your opinion on this, is why do you think it's a struggle for all guys really losing your hair, but for some guys it's just such a huge it's this huge struggle. What do you think are some of the reasons why guys struggle with it so much?
I think, personally, when it did affect me negatively for quite a few months, I was devastated. It was like the end of the world. Like, I couldn't just think past it. I'd be reading about crazy shit in Syria, and nothing felt as bad as what was going on my head. It's such a weird situation, being so out of perspective and balance, really. So I think there's a lot of parts of that. So one of them was, I'm not going to be attractive to women anymore. That was the first thing I thought. Oh no, I'm going to just look like an old, unattractive man. And why that affected me so much, but it did. It's just that feeling of almost being downgraded in a sense. That was one part. Was just general attractiveness, which in hindsight I know is so silly, but I somehow attributed it was my look, and if someone was taking that away from me, and then that leads on to my other part, which is the feeling of losing control, right? It's that suddenly I was very aware that I was mortal, that one day I'm going to die, that my body's going to deteriorate in every possible way. I know this is horribly dark, right? But that's how I was feeling. It triggered a whole series of existential ramblings and explorations and self-reflections, and that was another big part of it, just like a new chapter in life. I didn't feel like I had chosen to enter that chapter of adulthood. It just happened. That was a big part of it, that happening without my and I guess to any one of us, we're all God to ourselves. All we ever know is ourselves. We're our whole being is centered around ourselves, and then when we don't enact a change on ourselves, I feel that just shocks us to our core, because suddenly we realize we're not God. We are completely expendable creatures. And I know that's really a bit dark and deep, but I was thinking about that kind of stuff a lot as a result of starting to lose my hair, which is really interesting, and I'm grateful for it now, because it just led me down a path of just talking and reading and learning about all kinds of interesting stuff. I think for a lot of guys, like you said, it's that first time, especially young guys, talking mid-20s or early 20s, even late teens. It's the first time that guys realise, I'm getting older, or, all these things are changing that in a negative way, From sort of 15 to sort of 20, you're getting, younger than 15, 13, 12, you start getting taller and stronger, and you become a man. And then suddenly you realise, there's, now I'm sort of rolling back down the hill. And it's funny that you said those fears. I remember also thinking, I'm going to just look like this really creepy, just old, wrinkly man because I'm going to lose my hair, I had this really bizarre image of myself, where it like Quasimodo, where people would they would not want to look at me, and it's so awful, but that's what I was thinking, like you said, you think your whole image and world just comes down before you, and not fun, but we're two people that can show others, you can get through it.
so many guys, go through this, and it's not rolling down the hill. You hit that cliff, you fall down it, you think the world's going to end, and you can bounce back and get on with it. And like you said, I think when you hit that rock bottom, I've been the same. I've been kind of thinking a lot more about what sort of person I am, and like you said, reading more and trying to progress in other ways other than just your general appearance. And I think that's such an important point that that you mentioned as well, the whole thing about discovering what's actually important. I think is that, would you agree in that you've sort of had reevaluated the things that are actually important to you?
Oh, absolutely. Completely agree with that. That was a really resounding takeaway from the whole experience. Was it made me think about my priorities in life and what is important, and just the whole notion, having gone through that stage of acceptance, was, now in hindsight I realise if you shaving your head is enough of a detriment to really negatively impact your life, then you need to make some big changes in your life. You need to if it's just your hair that's the deciding factor, right? Wow, you need to reevaluate the whole lot. And of course, it should only ever be a nice embellishment, right? It shouldn't be your personality. It shouldn't be of course, if you work certain media kind of industry roles, or if you're a particular hairdresser or a model or something, it's different. But just generally, it should be an accessory, not the be all and end all. And it's so weird that we do fixate so much on something that's so insignificant compared to almost every other part of our body, like our vital organs and our general health, fitness, and our mental health. So much. Yeah,
even then, like you said, even if your career is loosely based on your appearance and things like that, if it's solely down to the hair on your head, I totally agree. You really need to kind of look into other, what's going on, because you should be able to lose things like that and still be able to achieve anything you want, really. It's not going to hinder you in any way. Fantastic. So let's talk about a little bit of advice for some people out there. You've obviously spoken about, how you got through it and your own experience. What would be some sort of things that you would say to people who are listening to this now? Maybe they're young, like you said, late teens or early 20s. What would be your sort of general advice to those guys to help them get to the point where you're at with hair loss?
I think a few steps I would definitely recommend. One would be experimenting with it, and realize if it's kind of early days and you still are considering other options. It's not like a irreversible process if you just want to shave your head and see what it looks like. If you really, really don't like it after a few weeks and you've got some huge problems with it, then maybe there is something that's better appropriate for you to make you feel more comfortable. But I think most people, the vast majority of people, would actually be really surprised at how happy they are with it. So that's one thing. And just generally, I think it's not going to be helpful. I was seeing all these people saying, oh yeah, it's great once you've done it and it's a huge sigh of relief, and it didn't help me at the time because I was just in the middle of it and I was just so depressed about it and upset and in just self-sorrow mode, and I couldn't listen to rationality at that point. But I think looking around, one thing that really helped me, I realized almost all men are going bald, and if that's the case, it's just part of becoming a man, right? It's part of growing up. It's a good thing. It's awesome. You've got to own it, right? And there's I don't know. It's with the implications of manliness being strong. It's not just about that. It does help, I think, to be fit and stronger and to to get into better shape as a general life thing. But I don't think there should also be too much emphasis on getting super jacked. Like you mentioned, there's role models like Bruce Willis and Jason Statham and The Rock, and that's just unattainable for the average person, right? Because they've got whole teams of people building that. So to have to aspire towards that, I think, in many cases, can be unhealthy and unachievable. But just generally thinking about health and fitness, it made me realise I could actually be in a lot better shape. I'm not going to ever be on that level, but that's a big thing I can do. And regardless of whether I've got hair or not, that's one thing I can control. What else can I control? And then by looking at it through that lens, I actually realised there were so many other parts of my life that there were quick wins and all sorts of improvements that could be made. And it made me just think, actually, wow, why am I worrying about baldness? This is all these other things that maybe I've just not been thinking about for years that I could be improving. but yeah, I don't know if that's very helpful, but maybe just think about your life as a whole, as on a holistic kind of bird's eye view level, and then just think about generally what your aspirations are. And just by going through that process of seeing what you've got going on and what opportunities you have, what you can improve, you realize very quickly how insignificant hair is in that whole kind of spreadsheet or mind map that you're putting together. And so that can help as well in terms of just reflecting, because I think life is so fast paced a lot of the time. We don't have time to reflect and think about big picture stuff. So hopefully that process will help people that go in bold realize that actually this is pretty insignificant, and if I'm tackling these other things, then it doesn't matter if I've got hair or not, because life's going to be awesome.
Yeah, no, I think that's fantastic. Focus on the big picture. If you focus on the big picture, look for ways to improve. Things that you can't control, but you can certainly deal with it in the right way. And like you said, once you focus on the big picture and realize how much other things you can excel at or do really well in, hair kind of falls by the wayside. And once you really take once you make that move and you shave it off, it's gone, and that leaves you with even more time and attention to deal with the things that really matter. Well, I think that's a really good point to sort of end it on. Is there any other last words that you want to share with the people listening?
Yeah, one really fun part of this experience has been just thinking about it as a rebrand. And I personally like to reinvent myself. I don't want to be the same Tom throughout my whole life. And in this new chapter, it's made me think about things like my fashion sense and my general look. Now I dress differently, and I kind of carry myself differently. And so, yeah, like thinking about it as a rebrand, almost as 2.0. Why does this have to be going down? Think about, the ultimate that you can be. And that whole lens has been just so nice to go through recently. Fantastic.
Yeah, it's like it's a change, but it doesn't need to be a negative change, right? It's an opportunity to mix things up and try different things. I like that. It's good. That's some good advice. Fantastic. Well, I think we'll leave it there for this episode. Tom, I want to thank you again. Thank you so much for sharing your story. And, thanks for everyone watching on the YouTube channel and listening on the podcast. We've got, like I said, so much happening. I've got so much planned for Bold Cafe in 2019. Lots more of these podcast episodes and people sharing their stories. I'm really looking forward to it. So to everyone who has been listening, I want to thank you again. Tom, thank you, of course. Thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. And I will see everyone in the next episode. Goodbye.